In the far reaches of the galaxy, where once vast empires clashed in the heat of war, now only peace reigned. Galactic empires, once fierce and full of pride, had long since forgotten the bloody history of their forefathers. Trade routes and diplomatic pacts kept the wheels of prosperity turning, and for most, the concept of conflict had become little more than a dusty chapter in their history books. War was an alien concept in this age of enlightenment. Among the countless species who walked the peaceful paths of diplomacy, humans were seen as quaint. They were a species often referred to with a kind of patronizing affection. Most alien civilizations viewed them as relics, a curiosity from a time when war shaped the stars. Once formidable warriors, now they were known as traders, diplomats, and explorers, simple beings who had settled into the quietude of galactic life. Many even questioned if humans ever truly had the capacity for war, given their present demeanor. They lived quietly on the fringes of the galaxy, scattered in small colonies and on Earth, content to keep to themselves. Humanity had found its place, or so it seemed. For other species, humans had become symbols of a peaceful existence. Their diplomats were invited to galactic councils, where they spoke in soft tones about unity, progress, and cooperation. The violent tales of their past were dismissed as mere stories, a forgotten chapter that held no bearing on their present lives. They were no more dangerous than any other species who had learned to embrace the light of peace. But beneath this calm exterior, there were whispers. Hidden in the most ancient of texts, among the oldest of human colonies, were records of a time before peace, a time when humans were not diplomats, but conquerors. These records spoke of an age when humans had expanded across the stars with fire and fury, their armies unmatched in brutality and strategy. They told of a warrior instinct so deeply ingrained in their DNA that, if awakened, it would remind the galaxy why humans had once been feared. But those tales were now myth, buried by time and the galaxy's collective forgetfulness. And so, the galaxy remained ignorant, complacent in their belief that humans were no threat. Until the day the Raxians came. The Raxians were a species unknown to most, emerging from the unexplored reaches of space. Unlike the peaceful species of the galactic empires, the Raxians had never abandoned their warlike ways. They did not believe in diplomacy. They did not care for peace. They existed for conquest, and conquest alone. Their ships were monstrous, designed for devastation, and their warriors lived for the thrill of battle. The Galactic Council was slow to respond, having forgotten the very art of war. They sent diplomats, believing that words could stop the onslaught. But words had no place with the Raxians. As the Raxian armada tore through one system after another, the galactic powers scrambled, unprepared and unwilling to face the reality that war had returned. They reached out for diplomatic solutions, but each envoy they sent was met with violence. The Raxians' response was always the same: submission or destruction. Entire planets fell under their banner. Alien civilizations, so accustomed to peace, had no answer for the raw brutality they faced. Human colonies were among the first to be attacked. To the Raxians, the humans were nothing more than an easy conquest, a minor species living on the galaxy's edge. The Raxians believed they could sweep through human worlds without effort, adding them to their growing empire. They believed wrong. At first, human worlds crumbled under the Raxian assault, much like the other species. Colonies were destroyed, and millions of lives were lost. It seemed that humanity, too, would fall to the invaders. But something was different in the way humans reacted. Where other species surrendered, humans resisted. And in that resistance, something ancient stirred. On a quiet, forgotten colony at the edge of human space, a small group of survivors made their last stand. Armed with nothing but outdated weapons and a desperate resolve, they fought with a fierceness that no one, least of all the Raxians, had anticipated. Their tactics, crude by modern standards, were lethal. Their strikes were precise, their ambushes devastating. Alien eyes watched in surprise as this small band of humans, with no formal military training, repelled a Raxian battalion. The Raxians were forced to retreat from a planet they had expected to conquer in a single day. And for the first time in their campaign, they hesitated. Word of the human resistance spread through the galaxy like wildfire. In a universe that had forgotten war, humans had not only fought back but won. To the alien empires, it was inconceivable that such a small, seemingly insignificant species could defeat the Raxians where others had failed. But for humanity, it was a reminder of what they had once been. The galaxy had underestimated humans. They had forgotten what lurked beneath the surface of their peaceful facade. And with each skirmish, each battle, humanity's long-buried instincts reawakened. Their warriors, once diplomats and explorers, now found themselves tapping into an ancient wellspring of knowledge and skill. The Raxians had unleashed something they could not comprehend. The humans were awakening. And soon, the galaxy would remember why they had once been feared. As the Raxians continued their brutal campaign across the galaxy, they set their sights on the human colonies, convinced they would be easy conquests. The initial assaults were devastating. Entire cities were wiped out, human fleets obliterated, and once thriving colonies were reduced to ruins. The galactic community, still clinging to the belief that this war could be avoided through negotiation, watched as humanity seemed to crumble. Alien diplomats sent condolences but offered no help. In their eyes, the humans were doomed, another casualty in a war they believed was impossible to win without diplomacy. Some alien leaders even spoke of humans with pity, remarking how unfortunate it was that they had to face such a fierce enemy without the proper defenses. For the galactic empires, humans were still nothing more than peaceful traders, explorers, and diplomats. They couldn't fathom what was coming. But humanity wasn't just crumbling. Beneath the surface, something ancient was stirring. As colony after colony was attacked, humanity's response became more coordinated, more precise. Instead of fleeing, many human worlds dug in, preparing for a fight that the rest of the galaxy didn't think they could win. In the heart of humanity's leadership, a decision was made. The time for negotiations was over. They knew the Raxians could not be reasoned with. The only path forward was war. What the galaxy had forgotten, humanity was now forced to remember. They were not just a species of explorers and traders. For millennia, they had survived in the harshest conditions, fought wars that made the conflicts of the present day look like mere skirmishes. Those instincts, buried deep in their DNA, were beginning to reawaken. On the colony of Ganymede, a group of human survivors held their ground against a Raxian invasion force. What began as a desperate defense soon turned into something more. The survivors, mostly civilians with no formal military training, fought with a level of coordination and savagery that shocked the Raxians. They used the terrain to their advantage, setting up ambushes and traps that decimated entire platoons. The Raxians, who had expected to crush the humans easily, were forced to retreat. This victory sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The humans were not only resisting, but they were winning in places where no one thought they could. The alien empires began to take notice. But still, they underestimated humanity, believing these victories were flukes, isolated incidents of desperation. They didn't yet understand that the humans were only just beginning. As the war continued, more and more human worlds began to organize their defenses. Old military protocols, once thought outdated, were dusted off and put into practice. Human engineers began modifying civilian ships for battle, creating makeshift fleets that were both nimble and deadly. But it wasn't just the technology that made the difference. It was the people. Humans who had never seen combat before were now leading guerrilla campaigns against the Raxians. Farmers, mechanics, scientists, all of them found themselves thrust into the role of soldier. And they took to it like they were born for it. The galaxy watched in growing disbelief as the humans, once dismissed as weak, began to turn the tide of the war. Raxian fleets that had been sweeping across human space were now meeting fierce resistance at every turn. Alien analysts couldn't make sense of it. How could a species with no standing military, with no recent history of war, be so effective in battle? The answer was becoming clear, even if they didn't want to admit it. Humanity was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The Raxians, meanwhile, were beginning to realize they had made a grave mistake. What they had thought would be an easy conquest had turned into a bloody war of attrition. Every world they tried to invade cost them more and more in terms of resources and lives. Their leaders, once confident in their superiority, were now growing desperate. They couldn't understand why the humans were fighting with such ferocity, why they refused to surrender even in the face of overwhelming odds. But the humans understood. They knew that surrender was not an option. They knew that if they fell, the Raxians wouldn't stop with their colonies. Earth would be next. And that was something they could not allow. Every battle they fought wasn't just for their own survival. It was for the survival of their entire species. And so, the humans fought on. They adapted quickly, learning from each engagement, improving their tactics, and refining their strategies. Their victories weren't just isolated incidents anymore. They were building momentum. Alien civilizations began to watch more closely, realizing that something extraordinary was happening. The humans, once peaceful and overlooked, were transforming before their eyes. It wasn't long before rumors began to spread. Whispers among the alien races spoke of the humans in hushed tones, referring to them as sleeping war gods, who had been awakened by the Raxian invasion. The galaxy was starting to remember what it had once forgotten, that humans, when pushed, were capable of unimaginable destruction. Still, most of the alien empires were reluctant to get involved. They feared the Raxians, but they feared what humanity might become even more. They had seen how quickly the humans adapted, how effortlessly they slipped into the role of warriors. If they helped the humans now, they wondered, what would stop humanity from becoming the next great threat? The Raxians, now realizing the depth of their error, tried one last desperate tactic. They launched a full-scale assault on a core human colony, hoping to break the human spirit once and for all. They brought their largest ships, their most advanced weapons, and their fiercest warriors. But what they found waiting for them was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The humans, no longer just survivors or resistance fighters, had become something else. They had become the embodiment of war itself. And as the Raxians would soon discover, the sleeping war gods were awake. And they were just getting started. The shift in humanity was undeniable. What had started as isolated pockets of resistance quickly evolved into a coordinated, galaxy-wide effort. Human colonies, once scattered and disorganized, now operated as a singular force. Across the stars, humans were awakening to a realization that the galaxy had long forgotten. They were, by nature, a species forged in the fires of conflict. Every world that had fallen was a lesson learned, every defeat a stepping stone to victory. Human leaders, no longer content with defending their worlds, began to organize offensives. They reached into the archives of their forgotten history, uncovering ancient military tactics that had once made them the most feared warriors in the galaxy. The galaxy may have forgotten how humans waged war, but the humans had not. And as these strategies resurfaced, they were adapted, improved upon, and executed with deadly precision. Raxian fleets that had once moved through human space with ease now found themselves ambushed at every turn. Human ships, once outdated and outmatched, had been retrofitted into formidable vessels. Engineers had taken inspiration from their ancestors, crafting ships that were both fast and lethal. Human commanders, drawing on ancient doctrines of war, employed strategies that bewildered the Raxians. It wasn't just brute force that humanity wielded, it was their uncanny ability to adapt, to outthink, and to outmaneuver their enemies. The Raxians, for all their strength and aggression, had never encountered a foe like this. They had expected a quick and decisive victory, yet here they were, being systematically driven back. Every engagement was a brutal reminder that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The Raxians had learned to fear the humans, but by the time they realized the gravity of their mistake, it was already too late. On the ground, human soldiers, many of whom had never held a weapon before the invasion, fought with an intensity that left even seasoned Raxian warriors reeling. These weren't just men and women defending their homes, they were soldiers born out of necessity, fighting for the very survival of their race. And with each battle, they became more efficient, more deadly. Human commanders, once diplomats and politicians, had now become masters of warfare, leading their forces with an unrelenting drive to push the invaders back. But it wasn't just their tactics or technology that made humans such formidable opponents, it was something far deeper. An instinct. A primal drive that had been dormant for so long, now fully awakened. The galaxy had never seen humans like this before, not in millennia. The stories of humanity's ancient wars, the tales of their brutality and relentless spirit, had been dismissed as myths. But now, those myths were proving to be terrifyingly real. The Raxians, desperate to regain control, launched an all-out assault on one of humanity's key strongholds. They threw everything they had into the attack, believing that if they could crush this one stronghold, they could cripple humanity's resistance. But what they found was not a broken and desperate people. Instead, they were met with a force unlike anything they had ever encountered. Humanity had unleashed its most advanced weaponry, technology once thought lost to time, now resurrected and enhanced. Massive war machines, capable of leveling entire cities, marched alongside human troops. Advanced drones and AI systems coordinated the battlefield with surgical precision. Every move the Raxians made was anticipated. Every tactic they employed was countered before they could even begin. It was a massacre, not of humans, but of the invaders who had thought themselves unstoppable. The Raxian commanders, watching the battle unfold from their warships, were stunned. This wasn't the humanity they had faced when they first invaded. This was something far more dangerous. For the first time, they realized they were up against a force that not only matched their strength but surpassed it. And it wasn't just about the weapons or the tactics. It was the sheer will of the human race, a relentless force that refused to be broken. As the battle raged, it became clear to the Raxians that they had underestimated the humans on every level. What they had seen as a fractured, peace-loving species was, in reality, a sleeping giant. The Raxians had awakened something they couldn't control, something they couldn't defeat. And as they began to retreat, it was with the full knowledge that humanity had become the very thing they feared, a species born for war. The rest of the galaxy watched in awe and horror as the tide of the war shifted. Alien empires, who had once written off humanity as a minor power, now saw them for what they truly were. The humans were not the weak, peaceful race they had appeared to be. They were war gods, capable of unimaginable destruction when provoked. And now, with their war machines fully operational, their tactics honed, and their instincts awakened, they were unstoppable. For the first time since the war had begun, the Raxians were in full retreat. Their once proud fleets, which had terrorized the galaxy, were now fleeing before the might of the human forces. The Raxians had thought they were the predators, but now they realized they had been the prey all along. Humanity had reclaimed its place in the galaxy, not as diplomats or traders, but as warriors. And with each victory, their legend grew. The stories of the sleeping war gods were no longer just myths, they were reality. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. To awaken the wrath of humanity was to invite total annihilation. But even as the humans drove the Raxians back, there was no celebration, no grand display of triumph. They fought not for glory, but for survival. The humans knew that this war was far from over, and their true challenge was just beginning. The Raxians may have been their immediate threat, but now the rest of the galaxy knew what humanity was capable of. And they would be watching. The final confrontation between humanity and the Raxians had arrived. It was inevitable, the culmination of a war that neither side could afford to lose. The Raxians, once the aggressors, were now desperate to reclaim their dominance. Their entire armada had been assembled for one decisive strike, aimed at a critical human colony that served as the linchpin for humanity's war effort. If they could crush this world, they believed, they could still salvage their campaign. But humanity had prepared for this moment. The galaxy held its breath as the two forces converged. Alien species, once dismissive of humans, now watched with a mix of fear and curiosity. No one truly knew what to expect. They had seen humans rise from the ashes of near destruction, turning the tide of the war in a way that defied all logic. What would happen now, when humanity stood on the brink of total victory or annihilation? As the Raxian fleet entered human space, they were met with an opposition that defied their expectations. The humans had not simply fortified their world. They had transformed it into an impenetrable fortress. The skies were filled with an armada of human ships, bristling with weapons and defenses that outmatched anything the Raxians had encountered. And yet, the humans did not strike immediately. They waited, patient and calculating, allowing the Raxians to come closer, letting them believe, for just a moment, that they had a chance. But that illusion shattered quickly. The Raxian ships, once confident in their superior numbers and firepower, found themselves trapped. The humans had deployed an array of tactics so sophisticated, so devastating, that the Raxians couldn't respond fast enough. Fleets that had once crushed all in their path were now being torn apart with frightening precision. Every maneuver the Raxians made, every tactic they tried, was countered almost before it even began. The human commanders orchestrated the battle like a symphony of destruction. It was not just brute force that won the day, but the cold, calculated use of strategy that left no room for mistakes. The Raxians, who had once thought they could overpower the humans, now realized they were facing something far more dangerous, a species that had mastered the art of war in ways they couldn't comprehend. Human warships cut through the Raxian lines, their firepower relentless. Advanced technology, combined with ancient tactical brilliance, allowed the humans to outmaneuver and outfight their enemies at every turn. Raxian ships were torn apart, their crews left in disarray. And as the battle dragged on, it became clear that there would be no escape. The humans had trapped them in a perfect kill zone, and the Raxians were being systematically annihilated. On the ground, the situation was no different. The Raxians, having landed their most elite forces in a desperate bid to take the human stronghold, were met with fierce resistance. Human soldiers, now fully embracing their role as warriors, fought with a ferocity that the Raxians could not match. Every inch of ground the Raxians tried to take was paid for with blood, and more often than not, it was their own. The humans had learned from every battle, every skirmish. Their tactics were not just reactive but proactive, anticipating the Raxians' every move. It wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about sending a message. Humanity was no longer a species that could be threatened, no longer the peaceful diplomats the galaxy had once known. They had become something far more dangerous, a force that could not be stopped, once provoked. The Raxian commanders, watching their forces crumble, realized too late that they had unleashed something they could not contain. Their once proud armada was now in tatters, their ground forces decimated. They had come expecting an easy victory, but instead they had found their doom. The humans had done more than just resist, they had obliterated any chance the Raxians had of recovering. As the battle drew to a close, it was clear to everyone watching that humanity had won. The Raxians were in full retreat, what little remained of their forces fleeing back to the edges of the galaxy, broken and defeated. But the humans did not pursue. They had made their point. The Raxians, and the galaxy at large, now understood the true nature of humanity. The aftermath of the battle was felt across the galaxy. Alien empires, who had once viewed humans as a minor player on the galactic stage, now saw them for what they truly were. No longer could they be ignored, no longer could they be dismissed. The humans had proven themselves to be a force to be reckoned with, not just in their capacity for war, but in their ability to survive, adapt, and overcome. The term, sleeping war gods, became more than just a whisper among the stars. It became the defining way the galaxy now viewed humanity. They were a species capable of unimaginable destruction when pushed, a species that had once dominated the galaxy through sheer force of will and power. And now, that power had been reawakened. But humanity did not celebrate their victory with parades or grand speeches. They had fought for survival, and that was all that mattered. The Raxians had been driven back, their threat neutralized, but the humans knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had seen their strength, and while some alien species would respect them for it, others would fear it. And fear, in the galaxy, often led to conflict. For now, humanity returned to a semblance of peace, but it was a peace built on the knowledge that the galaxy would never be the same. The humans had shown what they were capable of, and the galaxy had taken notice. They had proven, once and for all, that they were not to be underestimated. The Raxians had learned that lesson the hard way, and the rest of the galaxy was left to ponder the implications. Humanity had returned to its rightful place among the stars, not as traders or explorers, but as the war gods they had always been. And while they slept once more, the galaxy would always remember what happened when they were awakened.